Okay, y'all, if I could have your attention for just a minute, I will get us started. My name is Tricia C., and I'm a retired 10th grade biology teacher. I'm very comfortable teaching biology, very uncomfortable teaching the Bible. So I expect audience participation tonight because I expect that you know more than I do about the subject. Um, Morgan asked me if I would teach just talk about one of the saints during this week. And in a weak moment, I said yes. And I said, Morgan, what saint do you want me to talk about? And he said, okay, well, how about Thomas, the apostle, Saint Thomas? And so in a weak moment, I said, oh, yeah, that sounds great. I will do that. And then I went home and looked him up. And guess what I found out? There is nothing recorded on St. Thomas. We know very, very little information about Thomas, so I rooted around. There's a ton of it out there that is not credible, so be careful what you look up. And there are some things that we know. I've listed them here that I feel pretty confident about. But I thought maybe the approach that we would take, Thomas is only mentioned 8 times in the Bible. And that's what's on your table there for you if you want to go home and read the passages that speak about Thomas. But 4 of them, he's merely in a list of names. So there are 4 very brief passages, but tremendously powerful passages, all of which are recorded in John, where Jesus and Thomas are engaged in conversation, and Jesus almost pivots off of Thomas. So I thought a really good way for us to learn Thomas would be to go through what we already know that is factual, and then we will pivot. We'll turn 90 degrees, and we are going to discern or intuit what we can get about Thomas from those passages. So that is where I'm heading, and I hope that y'all will join with me, as we go. All right, so as I said, Thomas is not a major biblical character by any means. He's only mentioned 8 times, 4 times in Acts, and he is present at Pentecost. 4 times in the 4 Gospels, and he is present at the Pentecost, so that is in Acts. And John is the only one that really gives him a very specific role. What do we know about Thomas besides these things? We know that he was one of the 12 apostles. We know that he was Jewish because he was one of the 12 apostles. And he was probably born in Galilee. Most scholars agree. And he was probably born to a humble family. It's widely accepted that he is a fisherman, but that is really because he's included in some of the biblical texts. Like, Peter gets antsy after Jesus is died and resurrects, and he gets everybody to go fishing on the boat, and Thomas is named as one of the fishermen. And so it's just, brief references to things like that make you think he's a fisherman. But some people say he's a carpenter, and somebody somewhere really thought he was a carpenter because he's the patron saint of carpenters. Do y'all watch The Chosen? I've just got to go down this brief aside. I love The Chosen. Jimmy and I watch it, and we've watched multiple episodes. But I watched the episode of the wedding in Cana, and they introduced Thomas as literally the event planner at the wedding in Cana, and he is the one in The Chosen that provides the wine that is going to run out. And then, Jesus is reticent to perform a miracle, but Mary appeals to him and says, these people are going to be so embarrassed. Please help us out here. And, Thomas in this sequence is really upset. And so Jesus changes the water to wine in the sequence. And I thought, I've been reading a lot about Thomas. Where did they get this? So I started, trying to figure out where The Chosen got this particular duty that they assigned to Thomas. And all I could come up with was artistic liberties that they're taking artistic liberties. And I found this in several places when they were talking about Thomas. So I don't know, y'all. I guess when we look artistic liberties up, it's just going to be total prefabrication or something. I don't know. But as a teacher of 10th graders, I am well aware that we're going to raise a whole generation that's going to think Thomas is a wedding planner. And, or he's, I guess, Thomas the wine guy or something. I don't know with that wedding because of the chosen. But we are pretty sure that he was either a fisherman or a carpenter. And, you know, several times in the Bible, he's referred to as Didymus, which is Greek for twin. And Thomas's name is Aramaic, and it is Aramaic for twin. So they're not really sure that that's his name, that the literal translation in John would be Didymus Thomas, and it would be the twin called the twin. And the Syrians actually say his name is Judas Thomas. So we're going to go with Thomas because that's what we've always known that he was. But I thought it was interesting that his name translates on both sides, the twin. And boy, there was really some stuff out there about who was his twin, but none of it was credible. All right, there's no account of how Thomas became an apostle to Christ. But after the death of Jesus, he served Christ by spreading the gospel. And he went to India. He also went to Parthia, and he established 7 churches there, and he brought an awful lot of souls to Jesus. And he was very dedicated all his life. He was martyred in 72 A.D., and they think he was about mid-60, mid-70 when he was martyred, just based on how old he probably was when he followed Jesus. He was buried where he was martyred in San Come Cathedral, but his relics were later taken to the west and are enshrined at Ortona, Italy. His feast day is July the 3rd. He is the patron saint of the blind. And that's interesting because it's partially because he was at some point considered spiritually blind. He's patron saint of craftsmen, architects, carpenters, and masons. And tonight, when we delve into the passages of Thomas, I think you'll understand why he's their patron saint. He's also a patron saint of theologians, and this is what we know about Thomas. It's not a whole lot, but these are the things that are facts that we know. Making a mess. But what we want to do now is take what we biblically read about Thomas and see what we can intuit, because, y'all, that's not a whole lot, you know? It's not a whole lot about who Thomas the person was or what he thought or how he felt or... So that's what I thought we would do with this tonight and come up with, maybe this will be the gospel according to St. Christ Church. How would that be? And we'll see what we can do. Hang on, I got to get some of this shadowing off this board. Are you sure won't be able to read it? And I'm going to ask y'all not to tell me that you cannot read my handwriting, because I have been told that by every 10th grader that ever went through high school biology. All right. This is what we're going to do. Does that look familiar, bit? It's coming. Yeah. Lynn? This is something we do in Respite that is really good. Okay. Thomas had a moment of skepticism with Jesus, and we'll get into that later, that earned him the nickname Doubting Thomas. And that is the term that we use for anybody or anything that requires proof, that they are going to doubt you or they're not going to accept what you say until you prove it to them. And I don't think that's altogether fair. I really don't. I think Thomas gets a bum rap on this. And he's a whole lot more than a doubter, and I hope that we will find that out tonight. And I really think we owe him a round of thanks for what he is, for his character traits, because he has inadvertently helped us to better understand Jesus Christ. So, on that note, we're going to compile a list of character traits that are based on what we biblically know, and we're going to come up with a Thomas that we know and understand, all right? We first meet Thomas when Jesus calls the 12 to follow him, and Jesus warns all 12 of them. He's talking to Thomas, but he's talking to the rest of them too. And he's telling them there's going to be persecution, there's going to be tribulation. Nothing about this is going to be easy. It's going to be hard. And you don't have a guaranteed income, you don't have a guaranteed meal. You're going to have to trust on God for everything. You're going to have to trust for your sustenance in God, and it's going to be hard. And Thomas, just like all the other 11, accept that right there, then and there. And you can't accept that without a whole lot of love of Christ and a whole lot of loyalty. All right? Is there anything else in that brief passage that tells you something about Thomas? Talk to me. Oh, thank you, Vic. And we are really going to see that tonight. He was a critical thinker. All right? What else? If you're getting ready to follow somebody and they turn to you and say, okay, this is not going to be a picnic. This is what it's really going to be. Trust. All right? Thomas was trusting. Good. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Anything else? All right. Huh? Strong spirit. Sure did. And if he'd known how much he was going to get talked about in the centuries to come, it would have taken all that strong spirit to get him through. All right. So this is our first set of character traits that we're going to attribute to Thomas. All right. All right. The next place we're going to see him is in the death of Lazarus. When Jesus learns that his friend Lazarus has died, he tells his disciples that they've got to return to Judea. And the disciples try to talk him out of it because they know that, they're going to the people are going to try to stone him. They're going to try to kill him. That nothing about that is going to be good. But Jesus insists. And then Thomas boldly speaks up. All right? Thomas says to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Well, that's a pretty strong statement. I don't believe I've said it lately about anything. So what does that drum up in you about Thomas? Perfect. Bravery. Yes. Bravery. All right. Courage. Dedication. That he is. He sure did. He was faithful. I'm going to put that down too, Doug. Ends of the earth. Wow. All right. Oh, I know. My goodness, if I went to India today, I wouldn't be able to get out of the Atlanta airport. Uh-huh. Because of, uh-huh. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I've never been. That's awesome. Well, Mount St. Thomas. Oh, we could have put that on our list of facts. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Even though he's a wedding planner? Okay. That's awesome. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot out there. It's kind of hard to discern what is right. All right, y'all. So he says, let's also go that we may die with him. Thomas almost takes on a Peter rock, hard as a rock type stance here. He knows what's going to happen. And he says, but let's go and we can die with him. So he's definitely courageous. He is dedicated. Didn't somebody say that? Didn't we put that? Yeah, dedicated. He's very loyal. And he's almost zealous. I'm willing to die in his thinking. All right. The next time we see this is in John 14. Jesus is talking about the way to the Father. And this is just probably one of the most profound places in the Bible. After predicting his betrayal and Peter's eventual denial of him, Jesus comforts his disciples by telling them he's going to prepare a place for them, and they know the place he's going. Now, in my mind, it's a very reasonable response to say, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? That's not a doubt. That's more like you're asking a question, and Thomas is really asking the question for us. Because when you first read that passage, wasn't that the first thing that popped in your mind? What way? Where? How? Where? What are you talking about? I mean, it's a very confusing question. You don't know where Jesus is leading you. So Thomas is clarifying for us here. What else is he doing? What else is he doing? Yes, that's exactly what he's doing, Vic. Saying what everyone else is thinking. What I thought. What else is he doing? Just by virtue of asking a question, what's he doing? Huh? Great. Wants an answer. So, if you want an answer, what are you doing? You are questioning. Yes. There's a big difference in doubting and questioning. A big difference. The answer may be the same, but what motivates you is very different. Hey, David. All right. Also, another point here. Oftentimes, the gospel writers, if you look at how the things are framed in the passages, the gospel writers are using the questions of the characters, like Thomas, to kind of tee up Jesus's teaching. It's kind of making a framework so that Jesus can turn around and reply. And it makes what Jesus says back even more profound. This particular incident here, Jesus is actually playing off of Thomas's need for clarification, because Jesus responds. Thomas says, I don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I mean, those are the most... Raise your hand if you've never heard that verse from the Bible before. I mean, nobody will ever raise their hand. It's one of the most profound verses that we get. And no one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and you have seen him. All right? So Thomas is very, right here, he's very literal. He's very logical. All right? What else is he? What does he have a need for here? What? Good. All right? He has a need for information because he needs clarification, doesn't he? And unwittingly, he's providing Jesus with a framework to really hit home a zinger for us, because Jesus is saying right there, plain and simple, layman's terms, you want to go to God, it's me. The way to God is me. He's basically saying I am God. And so it's a pretty pivotal time. All right, last time we see it, Jesus appears to Thomas. For some unknown reason, Jesus wasn't with the disciples. Thomas wasn't with the disciples when Jesus appeared to them the first time, and Thomas refused to believe his friends. All right, well, why did Thomas refuse to believe his friends? How much experience did Thomas have with resurrection? Only one, that it wasn't really I guess it was a resurrection, but not like Jesus's. He'd only seen Lazarus raised from the dead. He came from a culture where you died, you didn't come back. That was it. So Thomas, I can see why he had trouble believing his friends telling him what he did. He had no frame of reference. And he'd never, other than Lazarus, he'd never seen anybody come back from the dead, much less come back from a crucifixion. So here's the passage. Here's how it reads. Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. A week later, the disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. And then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand, put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. And then Thomas turns to him, and Thomas says, my Lord and my God. We get so caught up in that doubting word there. We get so caught up in doubting Thomas that we miss the biggest and the greatest part of this scenario, because when Thomas says, my Lord and my God, he is declaring, it's the clearest declaration of Jesus' divinity that we find in Scripture anywhere. That's it. Jesus is it, my Lord and my God. So Thomas plays a very distinctive part. We condemn him for his lack of belief, but he's really courageous, and he's willing to stand by Jesus in dangerous times. He has this relentless pursuit of the truth. All right, we'll give him that. But, it's not because he's overly curious or because he doubts everything he sees. It's just because he has a need, for order. And then, no, he didn't doubt what he saw. He doubted what you saw. That's what he doubted. But exactly. And I don't think it's the flippant doubting Thomas. I really don't. I think I think we are, Doug. I think we are. And that's what I hope we take out of here tonight, that it's not a flippant thing, and that he should not be remembered just for being a doubting Thomas. And then Thomas sets up, with his questioning, this platform for Jesus to say, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And that is my favorite Bible verse. It really is, because that's us, y'all. If we're believers, then Jesus is blessing us in that passage. He's saying, in your belief, you're blessed because you haven't seen. And they saw. And so I just think that's kind of personal, and I love it. We're believers. We're blessed by Christ in this passage because we believe what we have not. So Thomas wasn't a doubter. He was a believer. He was a clarifier, and he set up for those of us that are coming after him. He was devoted. He was dedicated to Christ, and he spent the rest of his life, as Doug has told us, doing that, preaching the gospel in India and Parthia, and so passionately that he made those pagan priests sound they're really mad, and they killed him with a spear. He was speared, according to Fox's Book of Martyrs. So, in summary, Thomas is famous for having doubted the resurrection of Jesus and for demanding physical proof of the wounds of Christ's crucifixion. And the phrase doubting Thomas was coined for his lack of faith. But he was not really a doubter at all. Through his desire for truth and his zeal to understand, he becomes a messenger for all the ages. I mean, he sets up this stage for Jesus to pivot off of and give us, these wonderful things that deeply enrich our spiritual lives. So, my summary statement is, doubting Thomas really no longer floats my boat. How about y'all? That's all I got to say. Anybody got something to